Be sure to subscribe to WXOU Sports on YouTube. WXOU Sports is the place to be for all things sports from your favorite college radio station. WXOU Sports features live audio broadcasts of all Oakland University home games, including men's and women's basketball. They also feature interviews with athletes and coaches, with highlights and more. Just go to YouTube and search WXOU Sports and hit subscribe. Now, back to the show. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the GioMoShow, your home for all Oakland University Golden Grizzlies sports. My name is Giovanni Mosheri. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the GioMoShow to get right into the coverage of basketballs. We'll be covering it all the way until the season's end in March, hopefully later in March. So the GioMoShow is your place to be for all Oakland coverage, in addition to all the other sports off the blacktop, swim and dive and track and field as those sports come about. And when baseball and softball comes around, we'll be on top of it as well. You can follow the GioMoShow at the GioMoShow on Instagram. It's got its own dedicated page. And you can follow me on Twitter at GioMoSheriWXOU and use the hashtag the GioMoShow on all social media platforms to get involved with the show. So for this show, similar to what we did last week, where it was only coverage of basketball, both men's and women's, that's going to be the same deal for this week as well, as we have 4 games, and 3 of which going into overtime. So we're going to have a lot of extended coverage of the extra basketball that we got out of the 4 games played between the men and the women. And we'll start things off with the women's side of things. I only have 1 game played on the road at Northern Kentucky for the 3rd game of the Horizon League Series. This will be our first part of the overtime goodness. And if I'm thinking about it more, the Loyola Chicago game for the men's team was technically covered in last week's show. So technically 3 games this week alone, all of those 3 went into overtime. So either way, just with that correction out of the way, we'll get into the women's basketball side of things, where they played, like I said, on the road at Northern Kentucky, and I'll spoil it for you, their 3rd straight Horizon League win on the road. They are now 3-0 in the league, 4th place in the Horizon League standings. And to bring context to it, just before we get into the game itself, the teams that Oakland has beaten are lower in the standings of the Horizon League. They weren't predicted to be some of the best teams in the Horizon League. So if you're really cynical, you can say, yeah, they should have won these Horizon League games. But putting the coaching aspect into context, remember, I'll mention it probably every week for the rest of the season, but Coach Jeff Tungett had to retire shortly after their first Horizon League game, or I believe it was shortly after that game, but either way, had to retire a couple of weeks ago. So it's been Deanna Richard picking up the pieces for this season, and to have a 3-0 start in the Horizon League, no matter what team you're facing, all of them on the road, it's still a great accomplishment. It's still something that I'm going to give a lot of credit to for the Golden Grizzlies. So anyway, Northern Kentucky predicted the 7th place team in the Horizon League as of the preseason poll. Coming into this one with about 10 days or so of rest, they played a back-to-back on the road, a back-to-back on the road, and now they come into this game to cap off the 2024 year in Highland Heights, Kentucky. So to get to the game flow of this game, Northern Kentucky will build a really fast 10-point lead, 12-2 in the opening 5 minutes, as Oakland would go 1 of 5 from the field with 2 turnovers in that opening 5 minutes, putting them in a very early hole. And Oakland would be kept to about 3 possessions for the rest of that quarter. Oakland down by 7 after the first 10 minutes. But Oakland would close the gap and got the lead about midway through the second quarter as Jasmine Dupree-Hebert made a 3-pointer to make it 28-27 Oakland lead. And Northern Kentucky would get that lead back for a moment, but Oakland would end that first half up by 3, 39-36. So it's kind of swaying back and forth. Northern Kentucky with the first punch, but Oakland able to end that first half with the lead, and a big turnaround from that first to second quarter. In the first quarter, they were 6 of 15 from the field, good for 40%, making only 1 of 4 of the threes attempted. But in the second quarter, they went from 40% to 76.9% from the field, making 10 of their 13 field goals attempted and making 3 of their 4 3-pointers. So a huge offensive turnaround in that second quarter to help them get that 3-point lead going into the second half. But teams would then, in the third quarter, go back and forth. They would be tied at 52 by the end of the third quarter, leaving the last 10 minutes of the game, or at least what we thought was the last 10 minutes of the game, to be the one that decides the winner. Teams would exchange 3-pointers to open up that fourth quarter, where Northern Kentucky would actually, it went back and forth, Oakland and NKU for threes, but Northern Kentucky would continue that, going 4 of 5 from deep to start off that fourth quarter. Oakland was able to keep afloat offensively, but Northern Kentucky had a about 2-possession lead for much of that fourth quarter. And with less than 4 minutes to go, Oakland found themselves down by 6. Free throws by Macy Smith and Maddie Skorupski would cut it to a 3-point deficit with only a few seconds left. Oakland would eventually have the 1-point lead with 14 seconds left. And with that 14 seconds, they foul Northern Kentucky. Splitting the 2 free throws given, it would be tied 68-68 with 9 seconds left. The following plays go with an Oakland turnover and a missed 3-point shot at the last second to keep things scoreless and move things into overtime in Highland Heights. Oakland would be the first to strike in overtime, getting the initial lead, and would never let go of it. It did get close at many points with a 1-point lead, the lead being shrunken to 1 point. Sometimes it would be even tied, but Oakland was able to keep their distance and able to come away in Highland Heights with the win. Like I said, their 3rd straight Horizon League road win. Those are tough ones to get. You expect to get the ones that you get at home, but to get 3 of them already off the bat on the road is really tough to do. So looking at the box score for the box score highlights, Maddie Skorupski, of course, leads the Golden Grizzlies with 29 points, was an efficient 11 of 20 from the field, making 2 of the 4 3-pointers attempted, and was good from the line, 5 of 9 from the charity stripe. In addition to that, 2 rebounds, 4 assists, and 5 steals, playing all 45 minutes of the game for 29 points. Macy Smith would also play all 45 minutes of the game for 20 points, second scoring on the Golden Grizzlies, as she made 3 of her 8 3-pointers, along with 7 of 17 overall field goals attempted, picked up 6 boards with 2 assists as well, and a steal on top of it. And Madison Royal Davis will cap off our box score highlights, 10 points for her, 4 of 7 from the field, but rebounding is where she put in the work. 5 offensive rebounds and 14 total rebounds, leads the Golden Grizzlies by far in this game, along with 2 assists and another 5 steals for Madison Royal Davis, getting Oakland their final score 86-85, 1-point win on the road in overtime against Northern Kentucky. That puts them at 4th place in the Horizon League, 3-0 to start in conference play, and a 5-7 overall record. Teams above them all also undefeated. Cleveland State at the number 1 spot at 4-0. Detroit Mercy 3-0 at the number 2 spot, and Purdue Fort Wayne 4-0 at the number 3 spot. Detroit Mercy getting the bump for a better overall record to get over Purdue Fort Wayne in 2nd place, even though Detroit Mercy has played 1 less Horizon League game. So then that puts Oakland at 4th place. Following them, close by is Green Bay at 2-1, Youngstown State at 2-2, and the rest have 1 or less Horizon League win. And like I mentioned before, all 3 of Oakland's wins have come against teams in the lower half of the Horizon League. Their first one against Robert Morris, who is 1-3 in the league. Their next one was against Wright State, who is 0-4 in the league. And then their most recent one, like I mentioned, 9th place, is Northern Kentucky is 0-3 in Horizon League play. So could you could conjure up the idea that Oakland only beats the bad teams in the league. And you know what? If that's what gets 3-0 to start it, that's what you're going to get. So I'm not, you shouldn't apologize for winning. However, with that being the case, this theory will really be tested as they open up the new year in the arena. 2 home Horizon League games against 2 of the top 3 teams in the league. Cleveland State, the number 1 team, also predicted as such at the preseason poll. They come to town Friday, January 3rd at 7 p.m. at the arena, followed by 3rd place Purdue Fort Wayne Sunday the 5th at 2 p.m. in the arena. So it's going to be a huge test for Oakland women's basketball. Can they hold up that undefeated streak in the Horizon League for one weekend longer, or will one or both of these teams take that away and bringing them lower in the standings? It's only one way to find out, and you can tune in next week on the GioMoShow where we'll cover and recap those games and see where Oakland women's basketball is in the Horizon League standings after the opening 2025 home weekend. So that'll close things out for the women's basketball side of things. Much of the coverage this week is going to go to the men's basketball side as usual, as they finished up the Hawaiian Airlines Diamondhead Classic, 3 games in 4 days in Honolulu, Hawaii, over Christmas Day, or ending on Christmas Day. So we'll cover all of that. We'll take a short break here on the GioMoShow, and we'll dive way deep into these nationally televised games invited Oakland to Honolulu, Hawaii. We'll cover it coming up next here on the GioMoShow. And we're back here on the GioMoShow. Let's get into the Diamondhead Classic, as the Golden Grizzlies would unfortunately finish 4th after a great start. We covered last week, Sunday the 22nd. They played Loyola Chicago in the quarterfinals, winning it at the last second, 72-71. Quick recap of that game. Oakland just played great defense against the Ramblers, but with the 10-point lead, with 2.5 minutes left, they would lose cabin pressure, and it would come down to the last play where Baru had a crazy, fumble of the inbound pass, turnaround jumper, no good, but Isaiah Jones was right there underneath the basket to put it in with 0.2 seconds left, and Oakland walks away, surviving Loyola's comeback, 72-71, to move on to the semifinals, where they face the Oregon State University Beavers. And this is the one that we didn't cover last week. This and the next game, we'll cover this one in full detail, so buckle up. This game, like I mentioned, all of which this week were played in overtime. Unfortunately, this one did as well. So to get to know the Beavers a little bit, for many of you Oakland fans who I'm sure aren't familiar with Oregon State men's basketball, they are one of the strongest defensive teams in the country. Coming into that game, they were 5th in the country, holding teams to 57.6 points per game. They do not give up a lot. And this was a big physical team, a lot of international players as well. And they came off a 74-65 win over Charleston in their quarterfinals matchup to match up with the Golden Grizzlies here in the semifinals. So getting into the game flow, Oakland would start hot with a 6-0 lead and would end up by the first media timeout 13-9, and that media timeout didn't come until 13 minutes, 18 seconds into the game. So they just flew by the under 16 media timeout, almost getting into the 12-minute media timeout. But Oakland starting off strong, up by 4 by that timeout. And they were looking just as big and tough as Oregon State, as they were advertised to be. Baru and Alan Mukeba and Isaiah Jones were just fighting, you could tell, really hard for every rebound, and they were really closing up shop in the paint, not allowing the Beavers' big guys to get any work done. However, where the work was done for the Beavers was from beyond the arc, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But even though Oakland had that opening lead, you could tell that Oregon State was not going to give up easily, and they weren't going to lay down, and they would start to close the gap until they would get the lead themselves. Beavers would be up by 1 with 6 minutes left in the first half, 24-23. But just at the end of the first half, Malcolm Christie would come back with a three-pointer to get Oakland tied up at 37 going into the tunnel. And speaking of Malcolm Christie from the three-point arc, it was a nagging issue for Oakland in this first half, similar to the ones that we saw in the beginning of the season. Oakland in that first half, they were 2 of 13 from 3. Could not get it done from deep, but where they did get it done was inside. Alan Mukeba and Baru were dominant, and they were a combined 9 of 10 from the field at the half. Extremely efficient. Mukeba was perfect 5 for 5. Baru was 4 of 5, getting Oakland able to compensate from not being able to score from deep. But the opposite was true for Oregon State, where they couldn't get a lot done in the paint. They got it from beyond the arc. They, in the first half, were 5 of 8 from deep, and it was something that would continue for the rest of the game. Same thing with Oakland's struggle to shoot the 3. So the second half would start with teams going back and forth, fighting for that lead as they went into halftime, tied at 37. But Oakland would start to build a lead, a large lead, a 12-point lead that would get to 12 points from another Malcolm Christie three-pointer, 68-56 with 4.5 minutes left to go. Oakland is up big. But similar to the game against Loyola, that lead would start to slip away. It would start to slip away in the last moments. 12 seconds left. The game is tied at 71. Similar to, or rather, not similar to last game where Oakland in the final seconds had an inbound on their scoring baseline. This time with 12 seconds left, Oakland had the inbound on the opposite baseline. So they had to go the full length of the court where the Beavers had just all of the momentum, but Oakland was still holding strong, about, just seconds away from going to the championship game in the Diamondhead Classic. It was inbounded, and I hate to single out the player here, but the pass, it's given to DQ Cole. He controls the ball and brings it up the court. And remember, we started with 12 seconds, so there was a lot of time to get somewhat of a decent possession going, potentially feed it to the guys down low who have been pretty much perfect for the whole game. Alan Mukeba was literally perfect for the game. He would finish 10 of 10 from the field, so maybe with those 12 seconds you could feed it inside to either him or Baru. But as DQ brings it up the court, as soon as he's like 4 feet from the three-point line, he chucks up a three out of nowhere. Nobody saw it coming, and it wasn't even close. 7 seconds left, and Oakland shoots the three and bricks it. You just needed a two. You needed anything because it was a tied game. Anything would have counted for that final possession, but chucking up a three was just not the move. I couldn't believe what I was seeing when I was watching it on TV, and I'm sure much of the country couldn't as well. Just such a strange shot selection, and especially from DQ, who was 1 of 10 from deep by the time that game ended. It was not a good shooting night for him, but it's tough because Campy preaches like the freedom to shoot the three, but that was not a wise move, and that would force the game into overtime at 71 points. Oakland would go up by 3 to open up overtime, an overtime that we did not want to be in given the momentum of the Beavers, but Oakland would be the first to score. They'd be up by 3 in the opening minutes of overtime and would not score again. Oregon State would go on a 9-point run to finish the game. They would win it in overtime, 80-74, and Oregon State would go on to face Nebraska in that championship game of the Diamondhead Classic. A total deflating game for Oakland, took the air out of the building, and just was a total bummer, honestly. It was a total bummer to see the game end that way, especially when we had such control inside. Usually you feel like if it's sort of similar to football, where if you control the line of scrimmage, if you control the paint, then you feel like you got a better control of the game, and it's going to be up to those lower percentage opportunities like passing in football, or shooting deep from 3. You force those to be the only option to make up for it. You feel like you have more control of the game when you got the physical advantage like that. And that just wasn't the case. I mean, the Oregon State was shooting incredibly well from 3 to make up for their guys not doing well in the paint to keep it close in the first place. But it was you hate to pin the whole game on one shot. And honestly, Oakland shouldn't have been in the position to where it was only one shot, just because he had such a big lead with only a few minutes left. I think it was 2.5 minutes left, and you had a 12-point lead, and they're in 4.5 minutes, and it's all slipped away. Less than 5 to go, and it all slipped away. That's what really made it disappointing. Shouldn't have even gotten to that point, but when we were in that point, we did not execute well. Box score highlights for this game. It would be Alan Mukeba, who was, like I said, literally perfect from the field. He was 10 of 10, had 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, 2 steals for 21 points. He was a monster in this game, along with Baru, who was just 1 shot off of being perfect himself, 6 of 7. He had 12 rebounds in a game where he scored, please scroll to the side, computer. He was 14 points and 12 rebounds against one of the strongest defensive teams in the country. In addition, Malcolm Christie, one of the only bright spot from 3 for Oakland. He was 4 of 12 from deep, 5 of 15 overall. He made 4 of his 6 free throws for 18 points for Oakland. We'll get more into Malcolm Christie towards the end of the men's basketball segment. But overall, Oakland would finish 19% from 3, but 42 points in the paint would make up for it mostly. Not enough for the win, though. So thus, that puts them in the third place game. Losing in the semifinals sends them to the third place game where they face the hosting Hawai'i Rainbow Warriors. This is now the third game going into overtime of our weekly coverage. This one, almost a similar story to the semifinals matchup. So a preview for this one, getting to know the Rainbow Warriors. They won the tournament 2 years ago in 2022, and they come into this one with a win against Charlotte in the quarterfinals round, 78-61, but lost to Nebraska, who would go on to face Oregon State in the championship game, losing that game 55-69, putting them against the Golden Grizzlies on Christmas Day as part 1 of the 2-game event there in Honolulu, Hawaii. So getting into the game flow, Campy was wearing not the Grinch sweater that he wore at Michigan State, but wearing the black Grinch shirt that had the full drawing of the Grinch on. I believe that was left part of the chest was all of the Grinch. Commentators were loving it. National TV was loving it. You had the pictures going back of him and Campy at Michigan State wearing the matching sweaters, and commentators were claiming that Campy wins the all-time shirt contest for the Diamondhead Classic, showing past pictures of other coaches and stuff. I just wanted to get that good note here because this wasn't really fun either to talk about, but Campy was wearing a cool shirt. So this game started off incredibly slow. Now, the Rainbow Warriors are a great rebounding team, a great, pretty good defensive team as well, but both of them started off really slow. It was 2-2 after a full 4 minutes were played in the game. Oakland started 0 of 7 from the field, and Hawaii started 1 of 7 from the field. So it was just a 2-0 game for way too long before the scoring actually got started. Oakland was pretty bad from the paint. It was kind of a complete turnaround from Oregon State, where we couldn't get anything really going in the paint. And fast forwarding with 4 minutes left in the half, it would be tied 23-23. Hawaii would start to pull away, ending the half on a 9-0 run after Oakland was holding pretty close with them for much of that first half, and it would give them a 7-point lead going into halftime. Rainbow Warriors up 32-25 at halftime. Yeah, that's a halftime score. In that first half, Oakland was only 30% from the field and 1 of 9 from 3. That's 11%. Meanwhile, the Rainbow Warriors, 35% from the floor, not much better. Not much better from 3 either. They were 2 of 12 for 16%. But what really made the difference in this first half and would eventually make the difference later on in the game is free throws. Rainbow Warriors, 10 of 10 from the free throw line in the first half. A trend that would continue, where despite the good defense that Oakland was playing, they just kept fouling them, and they kept making their free throws. So the free throw defense wasn't there, which is, of course, not real. But, it kind of nullified the effort on defense when the foul would come and they would score anyway. And it was just, it wasn't clean. It didn't feel like the same game that they played 2 days before against Oregon State. And Oakland would find themselves down by 7 at halftime. But coming out of the half, Oakland would quickly cut that lead to just 1, where the game would be within 1 point as Isaiah Jones would lay it in, and Christie would make a 3-pointer and 1. Not the first time it would happen in this game. Not the only time it would happen in this game. But still struggling from paint are the Golden Grizzlies. Alan Mukeba, after his perfect game the game prior, started 0 of 5 from the field with 3 fouls with 16 minutes left in the second half. So he hasn't scored in the entire first half, and into the opening minutes of the second half with 3 fouls is not a good game for Mukeba. But Oakland would eventually have it tied 32-32. Shortly after that, Baru would get elbowed in the balls. I found that to be significant because it was so bad that they went to immediate timeout after he was able to gather his thoughts. But either way, following that, Hawaii would go on a 6-0 run to get the lead back themselves, and Christie would then come back. So a 6-0 run was had by Hawaii, but it was all canceled out by Malcolm Christie, who made 2 threes in a row, and the second one was another and one where he made the free throw. So after Baru goes down, he eventually does come back. Christie nails 2 threes, gets Oakland a 41-40 lead, and it would kind of go back and forth, but Jason Woodridge would get involved in the three-point shooting as well. The three-point shooting really started to wake up in the second half for Oakland, as Woodridge would get a couple of them, as well as Isaiah Jones making a shot. That gives Oakland their biggest lead of the night, 8 points, with 7.5 minutes left in the game. So now Oakland's starting to wake up. Oakland's got control of this game now, up by 8 with 7.5 minutes left. But Hawaii, the home team, and there was a decent crowd there. The marching band was, or not marching, but the band was there and everything. Like it was a home game for Hawaii for the third place game. So Hawaii would bounce back and get the lead back themselves, a lot of which were, again, free throws. Oakland kept fouling, and they kept making their free throws. So after already having a rough day, still playing strong defensively, but the free throws still killing them. So then it gets even tougher. We're inside 2 minutes, and both Mukeba and DQ foul out. Neither of them were having a good night, and feeding into the free throw frenzy that was the Rainbow Warriors offense in that game. Both Mukeba and DQ would combine for 6 points, 2 of 13 from the field, and 10 fouls, but 8 rebounds as well, to give them credit. But it's just they weren't having a good game, but to have them both foul out inside 2 minutes in a close game where it was only within a few points, and you got 2 of your best players foul out. But there was still one shining spot. Malcolm Christie was still on fire. He gave Oakland the lead 61-59, a little over a minute and a half left, gives them the lead. In that lead gets him his 6th three-pointer of the game already at that point, a season high, and the game's not even over yet. And then in that final minute, it would go back and forth. Baru would get them the lead, now 62-60. Baru would then continue to get the lead back, 64-62. So, it went back and forth. Baru, Hawaii, Baru again. And then with a 2-point lead, it's 64-62, 4.8 seconds left. Oakland fouls again. Oakland keeps fouling despite the effort they've been putting in. So with 4.8 seconds left, Hawaii makes both, and it's tied at 64 with 4.8 seconds left. Another scenario where you got to go opposite baseline all the way down the court to make any shot possible to win the game in the final seconds, like you did against Loyola, like you didn't do against Oregon State. You now have a third chance to make it right and win the third place game. So Malcolm Christie inbounds it to Jalen Jones, drops it, out of bounds, turnover, game goes into overtime. Didn't even get to half court, man. And I hate singling out the players for mistakes like that because I can only imagine how tough it is on them, and I know they didn't mean it. Okay, like I'm not gonna be a total I'm not gonna be an asshole about it. Pardon my French, but you can't turn it over there, dude. Whether it was from the pass, whether it was from the that can't happen, man. It's the last play of the game. You just got to get across the court. I mean, at least against Oregon State, we got it across half court and we're able to take a shot, but we don't even get the chance to get the shot and we turn it over. So it goes into overtime. And this is where another overtime we shouldn't be in. After this is already our 5th game in 10 days, our 3rd game in 4 days. Oakland's out of gas. Oakland's been playing at, minute 1 to minute 40 every game for the past, for at least the past 4 days. So they're gassed. Late nights and a, flight to Hawaii added on top of it. They're out of gas. However, they didn't just lay dead in overtime. Hawaii would get their overtime started by making 2 3-pointers, but like I said, for Malcolm Christie, he's not done. Malcolm Christie in overtime makes his 7th 3 of the day to tie it at 70 with a minute 35 left. Oakland is still in this. 70-73. They would continue to feed Christie, and Hawaii would make it a 3-point game. It's now 70-73, and we got a few seconds left. Oakland again with the final possession, and this time I got no problem with how it went and what happened and how it happened. We'll put it that way. I got no problem with how it happened. Not excited about what happened. So what happened? So the final play of the game, Oakland runs a fantastic set. And Malcolm Christie, like I said, 7 made threes in this game. A huge career high, career day, puts him on a national spotlight. He is wide open. They run a set where he screens over to the right wing and to the right corner. He is wide open for 3, and he lets it rip. Final seconds, a potential game extending, his 8th 3-pointer of the game. That shot would have been, and it's off on the left. Off the front rim, bounces out. No other shot was taken. Hawaii puts the clock out. 70-73. Oakland again loses in overtime in Hawaii. Now this time I'm fine with it, because you had your best player on the court wide open, taking his best shot possible. It would have been his 8th of the night. Now, he didn't make it, obviously. But the way I see it is, if you needed your best 3-point shooter, and at this point, I know Woodridge had a couple of threes. Woodridge did have a good 3-point shooting game, but all things considered, if you need your only 3-point shooter to make 8 threes to win the game in an overtime you shouldn't be in, there's other problems. Some of which I look to the 2 guys that fouled out early and had very poor games, Mukeba and DQ Cole. Like I said, there were 2 of 13 from the field with 10 fouls and 6 points combined. You need more out of those guys to not rely on Malcolm Christie to make an 8-3 in overtime, to not even win it, but extend it into double overtime. It wasn't even a win. Now, whatever, if he gets fouled on it, which no one was around him, it wasn't possible. Yeah, that could have been a game-winning free throw. That wasn't going to happen, though. You can't plan for that, and that you need to execute in other places to allow that not to be the case. And that was really what Oakland did in all 3 games, was they executed well until they had to. Obviously they had to throughout the whole game, but at the final moments they couldn't, and it almost cost them a game against Loyola, but they got the win. But it did cost them in the last seconds in regulation in the 2 following games against Oregon State and Hawaii. So those things need to be cleaned up. Otherwise, this was, I think, a great performance for Oakland in the whole Diamondhead Classic. But let's get to the box score of the Hawaii game. Malcolm Christie, a career day, 27 points, 8 of 24 from the field, 7 of 22 3-point attempts. 22 3-point attempts. I think what I overheard on the TV, I didn't research this, I don't know this in particular, but I think Malcolm Christie has a new record for 3-pointers made in all 3 games of the Diamondhead Classic. At that point, I think it was 18, but it might have been, that might have been at his 6th. I think the 7th might have been 19 made in 3 games. But either way, it was historic, at least for that tournament on its own. But he was just incredible the whole, all 3 games. So he had 27 points, 4 rebounds, made all 4 of his free throws. Baru would get things going, especially late in the final minute when he would go back and forth with Hawaii to keep it close. He was 5 of 11 from the floor, 8 rebounds, and 13 total points. Isaiah Jones, 8 points, 5 rebounds, 3 offensive rebounds. Baru also had 3 offensive rebounds. So they had a good showing as well. And Jason Woodridge, 2 of 4 from deep in the 17 minutes that he played, good for 6 points, along with 2 rebounds and an assist and a steal. So, I mean, I've been a little disappointed with Jason Woodridge this season, so I want to make sure I gave him his flowers when needed. So he played well in the minutes that he did in this game against Hawaii. But overall, what did we learn? Oakland has played 5 games in the past 10 days, dating back to December 17th against Michigan State at Little Caesars Arena. To review their schedule over the past 10 days, it's insane. So they were at Little Caesars Arena. They had about 10 days rest leading into that, but they would be at Little Caesars Arena and then had to immediately go from Detroit on a bus to Cleveland State. Late night bus ride to Cleveland, maybe like 3, 4, maybe 5 hour bus ride. They get to Cleveland State, they get 1 day of practice, and then they play that Thursday night. They get in on Wednesday morning, they play Thursday night, and then immediately have to go back to Detroit, get back to campus at 2 a.m., go to the airport at 6 a.m., fly to Hawaii. This is right after the Cleveland State game. They got to do all that the very early hours of Friday, and then go to Hawaii, play Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday. That's a tough schedule. That's a lot of games at once. And they don't even get all that much days rest. They get Thursday the 26th, Friday the 27th, Saturday and Sunday, and then they got to play again against Arkansas tonight, the 30th as of this recording. We'll cover the Arkansas game next week, but I say all that, I describe all that to say this was a lot for Oakland. So maybe as a coping fan, maybe they start to wear out. Maybe the big dudes started to wear out a little bit. Maybe it showed in the last game against Hawaii where, they weren't perfect like they were against Oregon State. Maybe it was that. Maybe it was playing overtime. Maybe it was playing another overtime. Like, it could be that. So we could take that kind of grain of salt for this 3 games. So with all that being said, here's what we've learned. We've learned that Malcolm Christie is a real deal. We learned that Malcolm Christie is insane. He started all 3 games in Hawaii after earning it, playing well against Michigan State and Cleveland State. He has made at least 4 3-pointers in the past 5 games. Not against Horizon League trash, not against the lower end of the Horizon League, against Michigan State, top defensive Cleveland State, Loyola, Oregon State, and Hawaii. He's made 4 threes at least in all 5 of those games. Whatever it is, ever since he put the goggles on in that Michigan State game, he got poked in the eye, recently before, shortly before that game, and he had to wear these like shaded goggles. They look sick, and he's been on fire since then. 4 of 9 from deep against Michigan State, 5 of 12 against Cleveland State. All this is from 3. 6 of 15 against Loyola Chicago, 4 of 12 against Oregon State, and 7 of 22 against Hawaii. He's averaged, let me add it up. He's averaged 19.8 points per game in that 5-game stretch. He's on fire, and he's getting national attention as such. He's being called, quote, the next great Oakland shooter. The likes of Travis Bader, the likes of Jack Golke. That's the company he's starting to enter himself in. That's the conversation he's entering himself with. But he's got to keep it going. But if you remember when we recruited him, so there was last year in North America, and I believe this was from Neil Rule on the radio broadcast mentioning this, but Jack Golke was number 1 in 3-pointers made in North America last year. Malcolm Christie was 3rd in Canada. He was the best volume and percentage 3-point shooter in Canada. In layman's terms, not exact numbers. But he was one of the best. And starting off the season, it was not good. He's really turned it on since the goggles have come on. And it's been a lot of fun to watch. And you could see it's similar sets to what Campy would run with Golke. And it's working similarly. So you got to imagine when we play Arkansas tonight, and unfortunately tomorrow when you're watching this, you got to imagine that Calipari is going to learn his lesson. Maybe Christie won't have the same 3-point shooting night as he's been having against Arkansas, but that's from experience with us doing it to Calipari last year. So if that's the case, I'll take it as a compliment. If he's doubled every time he touches the ball, I'll take it as a compliment, because that also means Baru and Mukeba should go nuts. So we'll see how that goes against the Arkansas Razorbacks. That one should be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm really upset that I can't cover it in this show as we're recording it like 1 o'clock on Monday. Game is later at 7 o'clock. Or 8 o'clock, rather. So we learned that. We also learned that Baru and Mukeba are still super good, a really good combination down low for Oakland. They've been playing, pretty much except for the Hawai'i game, they've been playing fantastic. Where Mukeba, he had 20 points against Loyola, 21 points against Oregon State. But Baru, he had 6 against Chicago. He had 14 against Oregon State and 13 against Hawai'i, along with at least 8 rebounds in all 3 of those games. Baru, 12 rebounds against Oregon State. Remember that. So either way, vomiting numbers to you aside, both of them have been playing really good from down low. It's just outside of Baru, Christie, and Mukeba, we're gonna need some of the other guys to start to pick it up to keep the offense moving. Gotta have somebody else make threes. If DQ comes back and makes threes like he did against Michigan State, all good. If he, he could score beyond the three or outside of just 3-pointers, but we're gonna need someone else outside of that the big Oakland 3, as I'll call them today. That's gonna be the key in this Horizon League season. Speaking of the Horizon League, that puts Oakland now a 4-9 overall record, a 1-2 conference record, down in 7th place in the league. Now this is 1-2 in the league is where they started last year as well, so it's not a death sentence, but it's not comforting either. So above them is Robert Morris, also at 1-2, but everyone else 2, 3, and 4 Horizon League wins near the top of the league. Upcoming, like I mentioned, Arkansas tonight, 8 o'clock, but they open up at home, similar to the women's team, against home Horizon League opponents. They'll be hosting the number 1 Milwaukee Panthers Thursday, January 2nd at the Arena, 7 p.m. tip-off, and then Saturday, 3 p.m. tip-off against Robert Morris, the team also 1-2 in the league. So those games are going to be really important for Oakland to decide whether they're going to continue digging a hole or will they start to dig themselves out. This is a really crucial part as we're getting into the full-time Horizon League season. 2 home games, got to come out with one of them. Would really like to come out with both of them. So that one's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll cover those games next week here on the GioMoShow in a recap sense. So that'll wrap it up for us here on the GioMoShow. We talked about 3 overtime basketball games. Women won their overtime game, but the men unfortunately losing both of theirs as we head into full-time Horizon League season. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the GioMoShow on all platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc., for weekly coverage of the Oakland Golden Grizzlies. Next week, we'll talk about Oakland's rematch with John Calipari and the Arkansas Razorbacks and their opening weekend of home Horizon League action, as well as how the women's team will do in their opening home weekend of Horizon League action. Can they stay undefeated, or will 2 of the stronger teams in the league come to town and tear it apart? We'll recap everything next week on the GioMoShow. My name is Giovanni Mosheri. Happy New Year, and we'll see you soon right here on the GioMoShow.